This is the lower kitchen garden. They grew almost everything they ate here on the plantation. So this was located close to the kitchen. Here's the back of the mansion, overlooking the Potomac. And you can see why Washington loved this so much. He had this incredible view just out his back door. I want to point out an interesting architectural feature of the buildings here at the mansion. These are made to look like stone block, but they're not. They're entirely made of wood. And let me show you how. They start with wood blocks that are beveled to look like the stone blocks. Then they're painted. And then while the paint is still wet, they throw sand on it. And that gives it that stone look. It also provides extra protection for the wood here during the severe weather. George Washington was absent from the estate quite a bit, so he heavily relied on his overseers to keep everything running smoothly from day to day. Now we're heading down the lane behind the greenhouse, and we're going to see the slaves' quarters back here. This is the men's bunk room. They would have eaten here, cooking their own food, slept. And there are 10 bunks in here, but there were often as many as 22 men bunked in here, so there were almost always at least 2 per bed. This is the women's bunk room section of the slave quarters. And again, they had to do everything here. They did their own laundry, they had to prepare their own food. They were given a food allowance, but everything else they had to get on their own and cook on their own. And again, they lived in extremely overcrowded conditions here. This is the stove room, which is on the back side of the greenhouse, and this was for the sole purpose of keeping the greenhouse warm in the winter so that the exotic plants such as the palm trees and other tropical plants, citrus fruits, would stay alive during the winter. So someone had to man this 24 hours a day. This was the Shoemaker shop, and Washington's slave named Billy Lee was the shoemaker who worked here. And he was assigned this job after he hurt his knee severely and couldn't stand, so he could no longer do field work, and he was assigned this job. And he had to make shoes for over 100 slaves that worked here each year. They received a new pair of shoes each year, all made right here. This is the upper garden here on the North Lane, and this was where Washington had a chance to show off his landscaping architectural skills. This was a flower and plant garden, whereas the other garden that we saw on the South Lane was for the food. This was the office and living quarters for Washington's secretary, and it's located just outside of Washington's study in the main mansion, so he could be quickly summoned. This is the smokehouse, where they would have had a smoldering fire here, and meat that had been cured with salt would be brought in here and hung to smoke, which would preserve it so that it would last a very long time. And they smoked vast quantities of pork and bacon and even some fish in here. This is the wash house where all the laundry was done for the plantation. It was a full-time, very laborious chore in Washington's time. This is the original stable, which dates back to Washington's lifetime. Washington was dedicated to finding ways to improve the soil's fertility, and so this dung house was where they collected the animal droppings and composted to create their own fertilizer. This was referred to as the Ha-Ha Wall. And while there's no mention of why it was named that, they speculate that it was because it kind of played a trick on the eye. Because if you were standing up here and looking back down over the rest of the land over here, you wouldn't actually see the wall. But the wall combined with the pit would have kept the grazing farm animals from coming up any closer to the mansion. And so Washington's guests could enjoy the outdoors without being bothered by the animals. This is the gardener's house, and he was not an enslaved worker. He was actually a paid worker. You can see his bedroom over there. So he lived and worked here. This was his office as well as his living quarters. This is the necessary, or the outdoor toilet. And it's rather fancy for its day, but that was pretty typical of everything that Washington did. And not only did it make it convenient for use, but it centralized all the human waste in one place. And you'll see inside there are 3 different seats, so it could be used by 3 people at one time. And the waste fell in drawers below that could then be pulled out and easily disposed.